So hello everyone, and hope you're having a good week. Welcome back to another episode of Supply Chain Stories by Pod Talent. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Seb Taylor, Head of Practice for Global Logistics, Operations, Technology at Pod. I'm delighted today to be joined by Graham Borthwick, COO Life Couriers. Hi Graham, how are you?
Hi Seb, very good, thank you, and thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you very much for joining as well. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and advice, and appreciate you coming on today. So I think to start us off, it would be great if you'd be able to give a little bit of an introduction into yourself, and I guess also your sort of career journey from where you have been and where you are now. That would be great.
Okay, so I've got a 30-year history in the supply chain logistics career now, so been around different parts of the supply chain, been around different parts of the world. I've been fortunate enough that I've started on the customer side, and I was working for Nokia at a time when they were very global, so I was able to basically develop my career in Europe, in Asia. I've spent time in the Middle East, in the Americas, so getting around the world. And from that, then jumped across onto the service provider side, which has exposed me to lots of different supply chains. So inbound, outbound, spare parts, all of these sorts of things. And so been very fortunate to have built a career in logistics and supply chain. And that's now brought me to the point where I am, which is COO for Life Couriers, which is a specialty healthcare logistics company. To be frank, much more purposeful, the things that we're delivering, that there's patients at the end of what we're delivering. So it's a very patient-centric, very customer-centric company that I'm involved in now, and applying the experience that I've learned around the world as we build a global healthcare leader out of the different companies that we have.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I know we've spoken before about your sort of breadth of experience as well. I was interested, I guess, in terms of that breadth that you've had, do you feel there are certain roles or certain companies that have really been really impactful for you to get to where you are now?
Yes, is the simple answer. To think of which ones are most impactful, I mean, as I say, I was very fortunate that I started my career in Nokia, in the mobile telecoms era, back in the times when yuppies had them and nobody else had them. They were big, they were, very short battery life and things like that. But there was some very people with a lot of foresight in Nokia, let's say, who saw the potential. And so when I joined, we were a challenger, and we had great ambition. We had very strong values, very strong culture to drive to become number one, which we duly did, and then to reinforce that number one position. And that was a great place to learn, basically, a great opportunity to understand how we could scale, to understand the importance of the supply chain, understand the importance of how everything fitted together, also to understand the importance of working with the different suppliers that we had, the service partners that we had, and how it all fits together in the ecosystem. So that was a real solid foundation for my learning. In terms of some of the key things that I took from that, one was really from right back at the start of my career, the operations director that I first worked for. And there was a thing that he said that has always stuck with me, that he said, okay, this is manufacturing. We hire you for your hands, but there's always a brain that comes with it. So let's make sure we're using it. And, to me, that's all about the importance of listening to people, involving people, and getting the different perspectives that people have in the team and in the business and things. And, all of those sorts of things together, as I say, gave me that foundation in Nokia. As I moved on, though, I'd got to the point where I'd had enough of mobile telecoms. I wanted to get some different experience. I wanted to understand different businesses. And so I jumped across the fence into the service provider side. And it was one of my roles when I was on the service provider side that I actually joined the company on a completely different focus. But they had a contract logistics business that needed turned around. And the CEO of the business that I was in, he saw potential in me that I hadn't seen myself, because I knew where the front door was on a warehouse, but it was only really the basics, my knowledge. I could not call myself an expert in contract logistics. But he said to me, you can run this business, you can turn around this business. And what he saw, which I hadn't seen myself, was I didn't need the domain expertise. I needed the approach, I needed the structure, I needed the data-driven attitude and things. that was what was more important. I had experts. I had people who knew how to configure the WMS, who knew where would be the right location to put something in the warehouse. That wasn't as important for me. What was important was how to structure that and how to drive that. So that was another impactful moment in terms of my career, because A, it got me on a completely different path from the one I'd been on, but B, by showing me that it was more about how I thought and how I structured things, that also opened up different opportunities, different paths. Because, look at Life Couriers. I've not got a medical degree. The different products that we're handling and things like that, they're fascinating, and I love learning about them. But I couldn't claim to be, an expert in the way that our customers are and things. But the approach that I've learned in terms of logistics and the consistency and the predictability around logistics, all of that stuff does apply specifically in healthcare as well. So, these sorts of impactful moments, they stick with me, and they have stuck with me over time.
Wow. Okay. So a lot to unpack there. I mean, look, I think you're completely right. I think if you can have a mix of both disruptive brands and industries where you've had to build, as well as going into, established businesses where maybe you had to realign, turn around, like it gives you such a wealth of experience, and it means that you can pull from that depending on situations, rather than being only through one lens, let's say,
absolutely,
as well.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I loved what you said there about, I tried to write it down, but in terms of it's about your mind and not your time. You talk about your hands, and it's about your brain. And I think there's a couple of things in that, which is, it's not just about what you do, but it's about how you do it. But it's also about that diversity of thought and bringing teams in together. Does that ring true?
Absolutely. I mean, it was actually somebody I was talking to just last week put it very well. And we were talking about, diversity in companies and diversity on boards and things like that. And the way that she put it, it's about diversity of voice. And I thought that's a really good way of putting it, because it's about people coming with different opinions, with different experiences, different ideas, and blending all that together. I've been lucky growing up through my career around the world. I've been exposed to many different cultures, and that's been really useful. People ask me, where are you from? And my answer now is, well, I carry a British passport, but I left the UK 30 odd years ago. I've been living around the world. I'm now living in my 10th country, and understanding those different perspectives. I can't claim to be an expert on them. I don't speak all the languages or anything like that, but I can claim to be able to understand different perspectives, see the good sides of those perspectives, and be able to blend that together. And that's very important. And logistics is a very global job. Even if we're only domestically delivering something, we are working in a global industry, and being able to understand those perspectives has been very important for me. And as I say, I've been very fortunate to not only get that from the books, but to actually live that, and to be in these places and experience these things.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree. I think that, diversification of voice is such a good phrase for it as well. Like, if you want to stay, relevant, you want to innovate, you want all those things, it's important to have that. And diversity of voice is a great way of describing it, because it's around having different backgrounds, experiences, cultures, locations, all these sort of things included in your team. And high majority of every study I read is that leads to productivity, that leads to happiness, that leads to profitability as well. So it's a win-win as well. So it's so important. Interesting. And I guess you touched on the fact that you have, been global, been around the world, both in terms of your remit, but also in terms of locations. I guess supply chain and logistics are transforming a lot. And, we've got things like the tariffs, we've got macroeconomics, we've got geopolitical, other issues as well. I guess, what do you think are the most important skills for leaders of the future that they must develop now to make sure they are relevant for the future as well?
I think one of them is a bit of a cliche, but it's learning how to learn. To say what is the skill that is going to be needed 5 years from now, anyone who guarantees that, they're lying, because the world is changing so fast. So it's understanding, how do you keep your finger on the pulse? How do you understand where there are skills that you need to develop? And, foresight and insight is something that I found very useful, because there are so many so many diverging opinions, so many diverging inputs, and understanding which of those are important, understanding which of those are impacting your business, impacting your customers, and how you can then respond to that. I think something else that's important within supply chain and logistics as well is when we're responding to those sorts of things and understanding those things is to do it in a, if you like, a structured or a data-driven way. I've seen through my time in logistics that we're an industry that's very good at shooting from the hip, and we reward people that fix problems and all of these things. But how do we give the recognition to the people who actually avoided the problem in the first place, the people who took that structured approach to just do a better job? And something that I've focused a lot on in recent years with the businesses I've been involved in is how do we get predictability into our processes? Because when things are changing in the world around us, we need to understand how to adapt our processes to that. And if we haven't got any predictability in our process today, how can we make a change and understand if that change is having the right impact? You talk about tariffs and the impacts that's having on supply chains and lead times and things like that. I'm relatively fortunate in Life Couriers that doesn't have a major impact on us. But, from what I read, there's a lot of people that are having their lead times impacted, their inventory levels impacted. If you don't understand what inventory level you should have, if you don't know what's going through your channels and how to respond to that, as you have to make changes because tariffs have gone up, no, they've gone down, oh, no, they've gone up. As you're changing to that, how do you know what that impact is going to be? How do you know that the action you're taking is actually having the desired effect and it's not just a random occurrence? So that predictability is really key for me, and understanding the skills of that and how to get the data out of a supply chain for that, to me, is so important.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point you make, because I think logistics is quite known for shooting from the hip. It's also the classic phrase that logistics is going well when you don't hear about it.
Yeah.
Those sort of things. And what that sometimes means is that people get accolades for firefighting because something goes wrong and you go, oh, this person can dive in and save it. But actually, the better thing would be if it didn't happen in the first place.
That's it.
I guess question on those sort of two skills, in terms of like the predictability element and building that structure, I understand there may be functional elements that you need to build in terms of systems and process and stuff like that. But how do you, I guess, instill that in your team? How do you instill that in your long-term strategy? If there's anything you can share, I know that's quite a broad topic.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way that we've done that in the past, a lot of it's kind of basic stuff. It's putting KPIs in place and reviewing of those KPIs, but particularly understanding what's coming out of that. When we see things are happening, not just addressing the symptom, but actually understanding, well, what's the root cause? That's something as well that I see people are very good at jumping on the symptom because that's what you can see. But what caused that to happen? Because if we don't address the root cause, then we're coming back and we're doing the same again and again and again. And that's why we don't get predictability, because that issue that has occurred, if it can reoccur, then it can bring that unpredictability. So taking those KPIs, understanding root causes of issues, removing those root causes. Something else that is easier said than done, but that I always have when I'm identifying what KPIs to look for, is trying to identify what are the leading indicators. What are the things that we can use as a metric that will tell us how we are likely to do? One of the metrics that we use in this business at the moment is because we have a lot of drivers, the number of drivers that we have in a location versus the target number of drivers. The reason why we look at that is because we can't predict how many orders we're going to get from our customers. But if we know how many drivers we've got and we've planned those drivers, we've done the calculations, we've worked out the routes based on the ranges that those orders come within, if we've got the drivers available within that range as well, then we've got a fair confidence that we're going to be able to deliver whatever the customer orders may be. And that is important for us because, particularly in our industry, if you're dealing with healthcare things, we can't guarantee when patients are going to need things. We can't guarantee, particularly, one of the things that we're big with is radiopharmaceuticals and the production processes of that and what they need to do to make the radioisotopes. It's a relatively complex process, and it's a process that sometimes goes wrong. So we will get last minute where we need to change. It's not picking up from location B, suddenly picking up from location C, which is 100 kilometers away. And understanding how we can respond to that and react to that is important. And as I say, knowing that we've got the right number of drivers and monitoring those sorts of things, it's a leading indicator for us to tell us that whatever comes up, we believe we are ready and we're prepared for it.
Interesting. Really interesting. And I guess also like those really micro aspects that you spoke about, I say micro, but in terms of the really like granular level, I guess they also give you an indication more broadly in terms of how well we are at being, predictability, the forecasting. I know you said obviously it's difficult, but if you're getting those right or wrong, then you have sort of a temperature check of hang on, something is in a process, a system isn't working as well. So that's really interesting to go into that granular later. Okay. Interesting.
When you talk about, the temperature check as well, an important one for me and one that I've learned over the years as a KPI is just safety. Anybody that is not measuring safety, I have a problem with that. I don't think that's a good attitude to have in a business because of the risks that there are there. But also, when you see the safety results and you see the trends in the safety results, I've never yet seen a business that's well run that also doesn't have good safety results. And I've never seen a business that has bad safety results that is well run in other KPIs. Because if people are willing to cut corners, and that's when accidents happen, and that's what you see in lost time KPIs and things like that, if they're taking those sorts of shortcuts and it's causing people to get injured, they're taking shortcuts elsewhere in the business. So I find that as, a simple pulse check on a business is to look at their safety factors or the safety numbers, and that will give me a good indicator of, is this something that looks like it's well run and they understand their business, or is it something that we've got to be more careful with?
Yeah. And you talk about, I know we've spoken previously about like ownership and responsibility and roles and what the culture looks like. And I think you're very right, actually. A safety metric gives that indication. You don't necessarily know what the cause is, but as you said, symptom sort of thing.
The mindset.
As well.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And you just mentioned, just because I think it's so important, like a lot of people will be looking at those sort of skills they can develop. You mentioned being open to learning as well as one of the points you mentioned. I guess in terms of like, we are bombarded with content and what should learn and what should you do. And obviously, especially senior leaders are going to be very busy in the space. How do you prioritize what area? AI is a big thing at the moment and stuff along those lines. What's your sort of methodology in terms of actually I should go and look after this? Is it very much I don't know what I don't know, and if something comes up, I go after? Or do you have, again, really open question?
Yeah, some of it. The honest answer is with difficulty. How do you, narrow down on where to spend the time and things? I would say a lot of it, and this probably goes back to the start of my career, I was involved in cutting edge tech. So a lot of those sorts of things I just have a natural affinity for. So, I'm using AI on a daily basis and things like that. Am I using it as much as I should? Am I using it as much as I could? No. But I know that I want to. And so, I'll tinker with it and I'll play with it and things like that. And I think curiosity is a key part, understanding what's out there, and for me personally, but I guess particularly in the last few years, I've become in a more senior position. I'm getting more interested in, things like geopolitics because of the impact that has on supply chains. You go back, what would it be, 5-6 years ago, before ships were getting stuck in the Suez Canal and pandemics were forcing us all into home office and things like that. We didn't really think about it so much. Everything was predictable. Globalization was easy, theoretically. But in the last few years, there's been so many things happening. There's been so many changes happening, and the new normal, as they call it, and the new instability that we have. So the curiosity around that, and basically, if I pull on a thread of something that interests me there, then going down and saying, okay, what's this about? How does this potentially impact me? As I said, one of the things that I'm doing quite a bit of in Life Couriers, I've been with Life Couriers for a couple of years now, which has told me that there's decades worth of experience and knowledge for me to learn about. So, as I start to understand the business, I then start to understand the products better, understanding the customers better, and just doing that research. And that's where actually I'm finding AI to be very useful. So taking a bit of time over the prompts and what I ask it to do, but then letting it go away and do the research and summarize that back for me so that it will go off and, go across 100 different websites and 50 different articles and whatever it is that it summarizes, and then gives me a 10-page report that I can read about it, and that helps me to get up to speed. And then if I need to go and dig deeper into those, then it's got the sources there so I can go and do that. So it's that curiosity that's been really useful for me. So there's not a particular skill that I would say somebody should focus on, but that goes back to what I said earlier, that anyone who knows where we'll be 5 years from now, they're fooling themselves. If we look at, and again, that's where I've been fortunate in my career. If we look back in 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we could not have predicted where we are today. We simply couldn't have predicted the technology. Maybe a futurist could, but for the everyday person like us, it's fast changing and the pace of change is increasing. And to me, predicting where to be 5 years from now in your career and things like that, that's a fool's game. I thought in the start of my career that predicting my career would be important, but I've learned that being open to opportunities, being curious about things, that's been much more productive. I've had much more fun in my career. I've had much more opportunities just by taking that approach. And it's the same with my learning. Be open to it and see what to do with it, how I can learn from it, how I can apply it.
Yeah. No, some great advice there. Thank you, Graham. And I think I was going to ask you a question on sort of the advice you would give to those starting out in supply chain and logistics. I guess you talked a little bit about sort of that active curiosity, which it sounds very important and led you to where you were as well. Do you think there's anything else that, if there were people looking at their, 1, 2 years or maybe, just going into it, what advice would you give to those people in addition to what you've said?
I would say at that stage of your career, the most important thing in my experience was to be open to opportunities.
Okay.
In that, I started, when I graduated, I was offered a job. Well, actually, just before I graduated, I was offered a job in the UK. But by the time I had graduated and I was getting ready to go into the world of work, the company came to me and said, we still need you to do that job, but actually we have a need for it over in Finland now. And I'd spent 3 months in Finland whilst I was at university on an exchange. So I knew the country to some extent. I'd had a good time, and they said, will you come and do 12 months in Finland? It's like, yeah, why not? That would be a good experience for me. That was more than 30 years ago, and I've not been back to the UK for more than 3 weeks at a time since then. So being open to that opportunity. And then as I got towards the end of that 12 months, there was, well, will you come and help us set up factories in China? Yeah, why not? And that openness, particularly at the start of your career, at the start of my career, I didn't have the commitments in terms of wife and kids and all of these things that sometimes can tie you down. Again, I've been very fortunate that I've got a family that's very mobile, so I've not been tied down by that. But I can understand why people say that is a constraint on them. But if you're at the early stage of your career, typically you don't have those constraints. So I would encourage people to say yes to opportunities. There's a famous quote from Richard Branson that I'll probably mangle, but it's along the lines of, say yes to the opportunity and then work out how to do it. And that's important. There's so much out there, and particularly with the pace of change now, there's so many things that if you say yes to them, you don't know what's going to happen, but you can always turn back if it goes wrong. But you can never take that chance again if you say no now and the opportunity's gone. And so I would always say yes to it and then enjoy the ride.
Yeah, some great advice, and I think that's very true. I can think of a number of people who have managed to reach, senior leadership roles in, global businesses, and I can now reflect on that. And actually, a lot of them took that yes to go work in Netherlands for 12 months or disappeared into the APAC to run a division there and come back. And I think it teaches you a lot about that culture, but I think also probably about yourself as well, because, growth is through, again, bad phrasing, but growth through pain. So for you to grow, you need to be outside your comfort zone. And so the more you're outside your comfort zone, the more you grow, theoretically anyway.
Yeah.
And so those sorts of opportunities lend to that as well. So yeah, I completely agree as well. And on the flip side of that, of those sort of senior leaders now that are wanting to move into that C-suite level where you are as well, I guess, I think a lot of our audience will be in that position. They're keen to understand, I guess, how maybe you made that move, but also what advice you would give to them wanting to get there as well.
Yeah. How did I make that move? I got lucky, to be honest. It wasn't planned, but I've ended up here. But I think one of the key things that I've learned since getting to more senior levels is the functional knowledge, the domain expertise, it becomes less important. At my level, it's more about understanding for the function that I'm leading or the team that I'm leading, where does it fit into the bigger picture? So where does it connect with our customers? Where does it connect with the rest of the business? And that's where I've been lucky because I started my career on the customer side. I've got that perspective, but anyone who wants to move into a senior position, I'd encourage them to get that perspective of the customer, but from the perspective and from the position of what value do you add for your customer? How do they understand that value? How do they quantify that value? And that's something that we often don't understand well. Within supply chain logistics, we're often trying to optimize for our own network or optimize for our own warehouse. Our customers don't care about that. So what are the metrics that are most important for them? What are the metrics that are important for their customers so that that's what they're driving their business towards? And as I've got to more senior positions, making sure that my teams are aligned around those values and around delivering on that is important, because that, in my experience, is how you get retention with customers, because you talk the same language, that they see that you're part of their business, they see that their success is your success, and it's been a very successful way of doing it for me and for my teams. And then looking at the broader business, connecting in with those other functions, understanding how we all connect together, understanding you don't need to be the CFO, but understanding what are the financial aspects of business that you're in and what are the important metrics that we've got as a business overall. How's that connecting into the sales strategy? What direction is sales moving in? What markets do they want to move into? What type of customers do they want to move into? And what does that mean for me and my team in terms of preparation for that? What skills do I need to be developing? What locations do I need to be opening? What technologies do I need to be introducing? Understanding where you fit within the broader business. And then when I've got that understanding as well, that's where, and I see this particularly in Life Couriers, I spend a lot of time just connecting dots. So particularly the way we're doing it in Life Couriers, we're essentially what's called a buy and build platform. So we have bought successful entrepreneurial companies in the healthcare logistics space, and we bring those together. We're taking the best people, the best processes, the best culture, and building this global company. But that means that we've got people around the world who they've never worked before, and they're facing very similar challenges. They're facing very similar opportunities. And in my position, because I've got that breadth of view, I'm able to say, okay, person over there in the US, they are facing a challenge that a person over there in France is also facing. Have you talked? Have you worked together? This person may have the answer for you. And as we get more senior, that's, to me, it's more important because we've got that breadth of view and being open to that and being aware of that. So anyone wanting to move into the C-suite, looking for those sorts of things and seeing how you can connect people. As you do that, it's good because the more people you connect, the better for your network, which you and I have talked about this before, the importance of a network and keeping it fresh and things. But as you build your network, as you grow your network, you understand the business better, you understand what you need to learn, you essentially prepare yourself for what is something where, sure, people come to me because I'm the expert in the operations, but they also come to me because I'm the expert in how do I apply the operations, how do we get the operations to serve the rest of the business, and how do we make those connections around. And to me, that's the importance of being at the more senior levels.
Yeah. Oh, some fantastic advice there, Graham. Thank you. I think interestingly, there's a couple of trends in terms of some of our other guests as well about when you get to that level that you hold the two bags, which is your functional bag and your business bag. And for you to get to that level, you need to understand how your function contributes to the wider success, and not success in terms of just your metrics, but what does it actually mean? As you said, the customer, the ultimate business strategy, and how does that entwine as well. But I think it is important to understand that your I don't want to say worth's the wrong word, but your ability at that level is, as you say, to join dots and to bring people together rather than to do the do. It's to see either the solution that might be there or potentially the problems that might come, and then put the right people in the right place to do the right thing, sort of thing, rather than doing it yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, look, Graham, thank you for all of that. There's some fantastic advice there, and I really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. Was there anything further for you to add?
I don't think so, no. I hope that people have found some of it interesting and useful, and thank you for the opportunity to share it, Seb.
No, thank you. That was great. I've enjoyed all of that, and we'll be reading that through later tonight as well. So thank you again. Thank you for your time. And I hope everyone else enjoyed that. Thank you. Goodbye.